Good evening. Welcome to WSBI, your resource for success podcast program, where you get to meet inspiring women-owned businesses from across the country. And now, for your host, Kimberly McLemore.
All right, good evening and welcome to WSBI, your resource for success podcast program, where you get to meet inspiring entrepreneurs and women-owned businesses from across the country. I am your host, Kimberly McLemore, and welcome to another night of sharing. With us, we have special guest Terry McDougall. Terry is a certified professional coach who specializes in working with high-achieving corporate leaders to build a strong foundation for continued success. She coaches leaders from a variety of industries and functional areas, including individual contributor to upper-level management. Terry brings both formal training as a coach and firsthand experience as a corporate leader to her engagements to support her clients as they work towards their goals. Prior to launching her executive and leadership coaching practice, Terry spent 21 years in marketing for 2 large banks. In her last role, she led the U.S. marketing function for 12 years for several business units of a large North American bank. So without further ado, please help me welcome to my platform, Terry McDougall. Hey, Terry, how are you?
I'm great, Kimberly. How are you?
I am doing great. I'm so glad we got you on the show tonight.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited for our conversation.
Yeah, I am too. So, because we've been kind of going through the process of squeezing you in and we finally get you in. So we're here. So I'm excited for everybody to learn more about who Terry McDougall is. So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself?
Well, you gave a good high-level overview. I am an executive and leadership coach, and I'm also the author of a book called Winning the Game of Work, Career Happiness and Success on Your Own Terms. I am a wife. I'm a mom to 3 kids, and I'm also a canine mom to a almost 15-year-old puggle, and I live in suburban Chicago.
All right. So you're out there. Is it cold out there today? Because I'm originally from Davenport, Iowa, so I'm very familiar with Chicago. And I know you guys got a little bit of snow out there.
Yeah, it's in the 30s. And, we had about 3 feet of snow not that long ago. It had accumulated with a lot of snowstorms over a couple weeks. And it finally all melted. And I was actually talking to somebody about how it was very springy. Mm-hmm. And then I looked out. I mean, if you're from Iowa, I looked outside and it was actually a blizzard out. Like just out of nowhere, we got like an inch of snow. I had no idea. So, but it's probably in the upper 30s today.
Yeah, you just gotta love it, the Midwest, right? So I definitely get it. But yeah, here it's definitely not too bad. A little bit of rain, but I can deal with the rain compared to the cold. I don't think I could ever get used to the cold again. So especially where we're from. Yeah, but anyway, well, again, welcome to the show this evening. I'm definitely looking forward to learning more about what you do as this professional certified coach. And before we dive into a little bit of that, tell us a little bit about your experiences of how you got to where you're at and what inspired you to start coaching.
It's funny. I've been asked that question a lot, and it's really caused me to do a little introspection. And honestly, I think that the roots of it go back to childhood, because I am the oldest of 4 daughters. So I was the big sister for a long time. And so I just was always used to helping my sisters. And then even when I was in school, I always liked to help people. If I understood a concept that the teacher was teaching and somebody else needed some help, I liked doing that. And then, when I got into my career, I was very ambitious in terms of wanting to move up. And so I was always really keen, looking around, trying to figure out, like, how do you do this? Because it's not really the same way it is in school, where you kind of keep your head down, nose clean, stay quiet, do your work, and then you'll just automatically move up. I figured that out pretty quickly, that that's not how it worked in the corporate environment, but I was really keen to figure out how it did work. And I did get to a certain crossroads in my career where I really felt like I wanted to get to the next level, and I was trying things that weren't quite working. And so I hired a coach. That really helped me. It did help me get to the next level. And so I knew that worked. And then, I was doing pretty well in my career, but I got to a certain point. I think you talked about it in the in the intro, I was at my last company for 12 years, and I had 4 different jobs there, and the company was foreign owned. Mm-hmm. When I got to like the last couple of years, I was starting to think like, I think I've outgrown the things that I can do here.
Right.
You know, I was looking around. I was kind of tired of the job I was in. I was looking around. I just didn't see anything that looked interesting. And, you know, the next level was in a different country. So I started thinking, what am I good at and what do I like to do? And I always really enjoyed the coaching and mentoring aspect of being a leader. And to me, it just made just common sense, right? That if you can really empower the people on your team and they feel good about what they're doing and they're confident, they're doing great work, that it just was a win-win, right? They wanted to stay, they liked what they were doing, and it made me look good because we were meeting our goals because they were, you know, living up to their potential within the organization. So I got to a point where I started thinking, okay, I think I want to leave, and what do I want to do next? And so I decided that I was going to pursue a certification in coaching. And initially I wasn't sure that I would do it full time. I thought, well, maybe I'll just get another job and I'll do this on the side until I get close to retirement. But when I was in the coaching program, a lot of the people that I was in class with were intending to start businesses. And I would say that maybe that entrepreneurialism was a bit contagious. And so I just decided to do that as well. And, you know, I really like what I do because it really, I loved my business career. And there's so many things about business that I think are really interesting and challenging and fulfilling and sometimes frustrating, obviously.
Right.
But, you know, I could bring that long amount of experience that I had in the business world together with the you know, formal training and coaching to help people who, you know, sometimes are struggling in that environment. It could be they've gotten promoted and they're not sure like what they're supposed to do. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of times in companies, they don't train people about how to move from individual contributor to manager or manager to, you know, broader scope leader. And, you know, a lot of times I'm helping people with that, but I work with people in a lot of different areas of challenge within the corporate world, including how to navigate the corporate politics. With nobody likes that. But I'm able to, you know, just bring my experience, having seen lots of different situations and patterns to the table to help people.
Right. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit because, you know, you talked about in the question I asked and how you kind of got inspired and knowing that you know, as a kid, you were kind of that go-to, right? The person that everybody came to because you didn't mind telling everybody kind of, hey, this is how you do it. This, you know, you were that kid. And so obviously that spilled into going into, you know, as you got a little older and then of course going through high school and college and so forth. Yeah, it's a little bit different world. And then coming out into the real world, it's completely a different aspect of it. But when you talked about how you enjoyed the experiences of what you were doing, but then you realize, hey, you know, I've had enough. I'm ready to move on. The thing I liked that you pointed out is that you even got your own coach. Talk about that experience with having to get your own coach, because I think a lot of times as we are coming into business, or even if you're not going into business and you're trying to decipher what it is you want to do when you grow up per se, you know, a lot of people don't think about, maybe I should go get a coach. They don't really look at that as another aspect of, you know, for a part of going to work. So talk a little bit about that experience a little more.
Yeah, I would love to, because I don't know that it really occurred to me. And I think that a lot of people think that when they see somebody in a leadership role, they're like, oh, they must have been lucky, or, you know, they had a good mentor. They just got on the escalator to success and went to the top. And I think that people that are ambitious and maybe are running into obstacles, I think a lot of them have had coaches. And I know this for a fact. I mean, I've been in the room when the CEO of a division that I worked in had a presentation coach coming in to coach him on to being a better communicator in front of big audiences. Right. You know, that people don't just come by this naturally, right? But I'll tell this story. I had a lot of pain that caused me to look for the coach. And this is what happened. My boss was the head of marketing for a business, And I was really his right-hand person. He would call me, and if he had a new big project, he'd call me in to help him strategize. I was sort of his go-to person. And he was a great mentor to me as well. He really taught me a lot. But he ended up leaving the company, and I was in that role for, maybe 3 or 4 years. And I thought, I think I'm ready to move up to this next level.
Right.
So I applied for his job, but I'd worked at the company for like 8 years. And I didn't really do anything to prepare for the interview. I thought people know me. I actually had stepped up and was sort of acting as the de facto head of the department in his absence. And, I just thought, well, people know, like, maybe people are going to look at me the same way he did in terms of like being a high potential type person. Well, I went through the first interview fine. The one with HR was fine. But the second interview, I worked in this large bank, and marketing probably had 400 people in it. And I was going in front of a panel interview of other marketers that were actually in a different city. Oh, wow. And I didn't do anything to prepare. I mean, I did some, I thought about some of the projects I'd work on and that kind of thing, but I didn't really practice. I just thought, these people know me. I know them. I went in and I basically fell on my face. I bombed. I just got really nervous. Right. I mean, I hadn't interviewed in 8 years. It's tough being in a panel interview. You got, 6 eyes staring at you. And so, I didn't advance in the process, and I felt ashamed. I felt really humiliated by that because I felt like I disappointed myself, but I also wasn't really sure what I should have done differently. So I actually said, okay, I don't want that to happen. That was a terrible feeling. I don't want that to happen again. I know I'm out of the running for this, but so I hired a coach. And it was funny because back then it was like the early 2000s. And I remember thinking, like, I think there's something called like a career coach. It wasn't that common back then. Right. And I remember I was like, I think there's something like that. So I went and looked on Yahoo because it was even before Google. And I found somebody in our town. And so I hired her. And, and it was like it was a little bit expensive for the time. But I thought, I want to get past this. So I worked with her. She helped me so much to increase my confidence, to help me talk about the value I could bring in the organization, to start to mentally elevate myself, to act like I was at that next level. So people would look at me like I was a leader, right? Not look at me like, oh, she's she's just a junior person in marketing or something like that. And she also, importantly, encouraged me to sort of look at my image, so I went out and I went on a shopping spree. I bought better clothing. I got my hair cut. I wanted to look like I belonged at that next level. Exactly. Funny enough, they went through the whole recruiting process for that job, and they offered it to someone who turned it down. And they just started it over again. And I was like, well, what the heck? I don't have anything to lose. I'm going to apply again. I wasn't sure that they would have me, that they would advance me since I bombed the first time, but they did. And the second time I made it all the way to the finals. And funny enough, the last interview was also a panel interview, but this was with the CEO of the division and his 2 top executives. It was in his boardroom that was right off of his office on the top floor of the building. It was like, I can remember it like it was yesterday, right? Even where I was sitting and where they were sitting and all of that. And I remember I felt very, very confident. I was like calling them by their names and being really like smooth. Unfortunately, it was me and an external candidate that were the finalists, and they offered it to the external candidate, which that definitely hurt me to be a 2-time loser. But sometimes there's a greater plan for us, because the day I found out that I didn't get the job, I came back and I had a voicemail from a recruiter. Within about 3 months, I had 2 job offers, and I was actively interviewing for a 3rd job. I ended up taking one of the jobs, which brought me here to Chicago. And the job that I got here was better than the one that I didn't get back in the old company. And so, I do think that when we prepare ourselves, that eventually it's going to serve us. Right. And, I'm so happy that that I invested in myself. I'm so happy that I took the risk of applying for that job again, because it allowed me to practice my skills under high pressure situations. And then whenever I had to come to Chicago like 4 times to interview for the job, and I was interviewing with very senior level people, and I felt really comfortable because I'd been through the ringer.
Right.
I'd already practiced that.
Right.
And so that was really helpful. But I think the bottom line was that I had the intelligence to do the job. I had the marketing knowledge to do the job. I just didn't have the polish to be looked at seriously. And so that was kind of on me to go out and get somebody to help me do that, which thankful.
Right. But I think too, with your, like you said, you have been the face that people have always seen. You were the right-hand man. So, we all kind of get in that comfortable position of saying, I'm not going to need this. I'm good to go. But being that you did take the opportunity to get the coaching, you really, like you say, had the opportunity to fine tune some skills. But even at the same token, you still got to learn that, okay, well, I made it to this level, but what else is it going to take for me to really make? But I think, like you said, we have a bigger picture, things that we think we're in control of, we're not in control of. But at the end of the day, being on the outside and at another organization, somebody looking at you completely different because they don't know you. So, I think that even helps because there's those eyes of, well, I know she worked for such and such, and these people didn't know who you worked for.
That's exactly what happened with, because I think that I've been there for 8 years, and I came in, fresh-faced, early 30s, and, they had seen me kind of grow up in the organization. And, for many people, they were probably still thinking of me as like a very junior person and didn't give me credit for the growth. And, and I think the other thing, too, is that I wasn't aware of how I was perceived. And I think it's important to step out of yourself sometimes and look and say, I think I have talent, but do other people see me that way? Am I positioning myself so people can see what I'm capable of? Because I think a lot of times we may, kind of be off in the corner doing great work, but other people don't know about it. Right. And I do think, to your point, I'm pretty sure that the recruiter that called me about that job had been told by the company that I was hired by that they wanted somebody from the company where I worked. That they admired that company. And so I think that me walking in the door before anything, they were excited because they were like, oh, there's somebody from that other bank. We like that other bank, right? And so in some ways, I didn't have to do anything because I already had the brand walking in the door. Whereas I had sort of the opposite problem at the other company. And it seems like it shouldn't. It seems like it shouldn't be that way. It seems like it should be the opposite, but I think that that's something to be aware of sometimes, that, sometimes there are perceptions that are really beyond our control, but we need to understand what they are so that we can either, enhance it or counteract it.
But even, like I said, when you were talking about the fact that you just didn't look at the fact that you couldn't communicate in the way that you thought you should have, you looked at everything about you. And that's what we all have to do on occasion. We have to pivot here and there to figure out what are we not doing correctly, even if you don't go and get a coach. Because I have not heard too many people who've done that when it came time to actually reapply for another position. Most people just apply for it and they think that they have all the right skill sets. And it's funny, we all realize that we can put whatever we want to put on paper, but reality comes, when you're stuck in certain circumstances and situations that you have to show up and you have to show out. You have to know who you are and understand what you are and what you're doing. So on the level that you are currently, and have been working with high level leaders in the corporate entity, what are the things that you see with the higher level leaders that you have constantly had to work with them on, and how it affects not just themselves, but their business as a whole, and then the people who are working, next to them and below them and beside them? What are the things that you see on a regular?
Let's see. I mean, some of the things that I see, particularly when people are getting promoted to, say, a director level, where they're going from sort of being a team leader to being a director and I actually have an example of somebody that I worked with who had been a team leader of 8 people. And I would consider her to be a player coach. You know, so if somebody had some trouble with a project or something, that she would just jump in and maybe take it off their plate or help them with it directly. And, you know, she just sort of kept the whole team moving forward kind of with her strength.
Right.
Well, she was looked at positively. She got promoted to the director of the larger department that had 50 people in it. And she just kept trying to manage at that level the same way she had managed when she had 8 people on her team. And when I first started working with her, she was probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 months into that new role. And one of the first things that she said to me was, I'm working like 70 hours a week. I'm miserable. I don't know if I can keep this up. I'm considering asking my boss to demote me. And I said, okay, please don't do that. Let's see what we can do.
Right.
You know, she was just really sort of at her wit's end. And I think that the thing was that I see this a lot with high achieving people is that they've gotten to where they are because they are hard workers. They're smart. They're willing, you know, it's got good work ethic. They're willing to, you know, put in the elbow grease. And a lot of times when they meet challenges, they will double down. They'll try to go faster. They'll try to do more. They'll try to push harder. And that's basically what this client was doing. And she wasn't really leveraging all of the resources that were at her disposal at that higher level. And so we just sort of started picking them off one by one. And the first thing that we did was, you know, she was saying she had 2 small children, and she said, I never have time because I'm working. I have to take work home with me. I can't get my work done during the week. And I said, okay, well, why don't we try you closing your door at work like 1 to 2 hours a day? And she actually felt uncomfortable with that at first because she really wanted to be one of those, you know, open door managers. Yeah. And but the problem with that was because when her door was open, she had people coming in all day long asking her to solve a lot of problems, many of which were well below her pay grade. And she felt bad, or she felt weird about closing her door, but she did. And that helped her tremendously because she got a lot of work done during the week that she didn't have to take home on the weekends. And miraculously, what she found was that when she opened her door, a lot of those problems that people came to her with had already been solved. Right? Because if you're the path of least resistance, people are going to come to you. But if you put some gates in place, they're going to find other ways to get their needs met. They're going to ask their colleague. They're going to work a little harder to figure it out themselves or whatever, right? And so that was a good lesson. And then there were just a lot of other things that we looked at, like, you know, we just picked off the things one by one, like, let's look for more efficiencies. You know, some other things were like that she had, I think, 4 direct reports, and each of them had to give her a report at a certain time each week that she had to consolidate into a report for her boss. And she was sort of talking about how they were all in different formats, and it took her a lot of time. And I was like, okay, stop right there.
Right. Yeah,
like,
you're not supposed to be doing the work.
This,
right? Exactly.
Yes, exactly. But I think sometimes, you know, when we're hard workers, and I do see this a lot with especially people that are sort of humble and are good at a lot of things, you know, that they'll say to themselves, like, I'm not above this. And, you know, oh, it's just faster for me to do this. Right. And as you rise, you need to have more discipline to really work on your highest value work and to find ways to get the other work done that you don't have to touch. Right. So that could be building processes. It could be delegating. It could be, you know, stepping back and saying, you know, are there things that we've just been doing that aren't needed anymore? Right. You know, and as a leader, you have to have the time to consider those things. Exactly. And if you allow your schedule to get packed, you don't have the time to consider that sort of stuff.
Right. Well, and that kind of leads me into this next question, because as we know, 2020 was the craziness, and we're still kind of in that same scenario. So how do you work with your clientele now? I know they've had to pivot and do a whole lot of changing because we're not in that big office environment, you know, an entity on a regular basis anymore. So what type of coaching and advice are you giving now, because circumstances have changed dramatically with people working more from home?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's funny because I actually did a survey of marketers in December and January that was focused on COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the questions that I asked was, what impact has COVID had on your career satisfaction? And 44% of people said that it's unchanged. 27.9% said that they're less satisfied with their career, and 27.5% said they're more.
Wow.
So it was basically almost a wash, right? It was really less than 1% that were, less satisfied.
Mm-hmm.
And, digging into the comments, the reason that people were more satisfied is because they had more time in the day. They didn't have to commute.
Right.
They had more flexibility. They could walk their dog in the middle of the day, whatever. The people that were less satisfied, couple reasons. One, some of the industries had been pretty hard hit by COVID, and maybe they had layoffs, and the people that were left were expected to shoulder more of the burden.
Mm-hmm.
That's tough. Balancing, home and work, maybe homeschooling kids, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's all the things that we've heard. But a lot of my clients had told me about this third thing, and it definitely came up in the survey as well, is that people are without the physical boundary between home and work, people are finding it really difficult to stop working. I've had clients that have said, I think that some people sort of feel guilty that they're working from home, maybe like underneath of it all, subconsciously in a way, almost feel like they're, playing hooky or something. And so sometimes they want to work harder or, be on email until, 9:00 at night to prove that even though I'm home, I'm working.
Right.
And, I think that it's really, really critical to put those boundaries in place. I'm thinking about one client that said that, every time that she was working at her dining room table, and when she would walk through her dining room, when she saw her laptop, she always felt like she needed to stop and check if any new emails came in.
Right.
No matter what time it was.
Yeah. But at the same token, it also goes to show you that these individuals, you don't need to work 10, 15, 20 hours a day in order to prove you can get the work done. And the lifestyle of having to feel like, you have to be the first person in the room and the last person in the room every single day, so to speak, whether you're working from home or when you were in that office environment, that should have been a trigger of saying, what was I doing to myself? Why do I feel like I need to have that laptop in front of me all the time, or I have to be that person sitting in the office in order to get something accomplished? So having this new world of teleworking, does obviously give you a little more flexibility, but it also allows you to reassess what you're doing and why you did it the way you did the first time. And, and obviously more and more companies are saying, hey, we're not going to be going back to the office. So you do have to have that balance, that, as we call it, the work-life balance, whether you were in the office before or not. And people weren't really taking it as serious as they are now because they don't have a choice because you're stuck at home more often. So, with those individuals, what advice would you give them, that are, like you said, the woman's still feeling like, oh my gosh, I walked past my laptop and I got to open it up.
Yeah.
What other advice would you give to somebody who is still struggling with that after over a year? As saying that, if I'm not that last person in the room, so to speak, how are people going to look at me?
Right. Yeah. I mean, really making some rules for yourself. I mean, that particular person that I'm thinking of, one of the things that she did was blocked out a lunch hour on her calendar every day. And even though she was at home, she would, make herself lunch and sit down and eat it, maybe go out for a short walk. Just to physically take a break from work, not sit and, on a conference call and, try to slurp something down. Right. The other thing was to physically put her laptop away when, whatever time she decided. I wasn't saying at 5:00, close your laptop. I'd say, what time is a time that feels comfortable for you to say that you've done a good day of work and you're done. Right. And, so if it was 5:30, 6:00, whatever, close the laptop and put it away someplace so that it's not there in front of you. But I think that one of the things that's important to understand, and I've when I was writing my book, I came across some research that a professor at Harvard Business School did. His name's Tom DeLong, and he says that he believes that high achievers are addicted to external validation. And when I read that, it really blew my mind, but it also, I was like, wow, because that seems so true. And if you really think about, people that are high achievers, usually, they did well at school or maybe athletics, something that they did that if they paid attention to what somebody outside of them was telling them to do, they got rewarded for it. Right. If the teacher said do X, Y, and Z, and they did it, and they got an A, they got a gold star, whatever, they kept doing it because they were rewarded for it. And so what happens over time is that high achievers learn to delay gratification. And what that means is they actually sort of lose connection with themselves, right? Like with the things that they want. And if you think about like when we're little kids and mom says, come in for lunch or come in for dinner, we're like, no, I want to stay out and play, right? Because we're so into our desires and what we enjoy, right? But what we learn over time is to delay that gratification and look at others to say, what is it that you expect? And then I think that what happens over time is that, if people have been successful by using this way of interacting, that they start to fear that if they start to pay less attention to what other people think, that means they're going to fail. Okay. And that's not true. Right. It's really a matter of starting to step into the gray area and saying, well, where is the boundary? Because I'm keeping myself on a really short leash here, right? If you're feeling like, oh my gosh, I have to work until 10 o'clock at night, I have to prove myself constantly. Exactly. That's exhausting. It's really like a straitjacket. Right. But you start to say like, how much can I get away with? Exactly. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Right, I mean if you don't stay until 7 o'clock at night, what if you left at 5 o'clock? What if you left at 5:30? What if you didn't work over the weekend? Is there going to be any difference in the way that you're perceived? Exactly. I mean, it's kind of funny because I very, very rarely during my corporate career brought my laptop home on the weekends. And I knew people that brought their laptop home every weekend. And it did not hurt my career at all. Right. Because I think it gave me like distance to think about bigger things. Not to worry about some of the minutia that,
Right. Yeah. And I think a big part of it, like you're saying, it's a big part of for most people's perception, like I said, oh, if I don't bring this home tonight, or if I don't work to that 10, 11 o'clock at night, then people are going to perceive me as being lazy or I'm not getting anything done. But as I said earlier, the world has turned and it goes to prove that you don't always have to have that 10, 12-hour day. You can get just as much done in a 4 or 5 hour period than you can sometimes in an 8 or 10 hour period because you're no longer being pulled constantly. Like you said earlier, the young lady who was sitting in the office that, if the door's open all the time, there's always somebody pulling at you, always looking at ways, well, hey, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you come to this meeting or that meeting? Now you have that a little more flexibility and everything is pretty much in stone because you're doing your Zooming, or Teams or whatever foundation you're utilizing in order to accomplish these meetings. And if it lasts 2 or 3 hours, it's done. You don't have to worry about all that extra that's not necessary in order to get something accomplished. So I think there's definitely a balance and, people having to realize their intent of what it means to actually be perceived as a good worker. And it's really not about what the perception is, it's about the value and the work that you bring to the table versus, just, okay, well, how does it look if I'm not sitting by my laptop and answering every message right away, type scenario after working hours per se.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think that we can set expectations as well. And I think some of the toughest things are, when people have set the expectation, like I've certainly, in the corporate world said like, oh, just, somebody would say, well, just text this person, like they'll answer right away. Right. And that somebody sets that expectation like, oh yeah, they'll answer right away, even on the weekends or late at night or whatever. But there might be somebody else that that you're not going to hear from them until Monday morning. Right. If it's like Friday or over the weekend. And that's okay. If that they will get back to you. It's just going to be on Monday. That's fine. It's just, I think sometimes when we allow the boundary or there's no boundaries, right? That anybody can just come up and ask you anything at any time, that doesn't leave us a lot of space to just live our lives and be human and be able to recharge and rest and get away from work. Mm-hmm. And we need that. We need that. I mean, we're not machines. You know, we need and we deserve to have time away to recharge and refresh and enjoy our lives.
Exactly. And like I said, that's a great way of things that we've all learned. I believe, you know, majority of people have throughout the 2020, you know, as much as people wanted to be at home, you know, they were fine with it for a while. And then it was like, oh my gosh, I need to get out here and breathe. But then at the same token, like I said, it really gave everybody an opportunity to reassess how they're living their lives. What are they doing? You know, whether it was their personal job or whether it's a business or whatever the case may be, you know, like I said, everything changed. So we all had to do some type of pivoting somewhere to where it was more aligned to the way things are today, you know, and like I said, the majority of us are still teleworking from home. But so I have a couple more questions for you before we end our evening, but I wanted to, I always ask my guests that, you know, if there was somebody who wanted to be a coach, what advice would you give them in order to take the steps of becoming a professional coach?
Well, I mean, I would have them talk to some coaches to see if they, you know, because I think for a lot of professions, you can look at it from the outside and say, oh, I think I know what it takes to do that. Or I think I know what it's like if you become that thing. But a lot of times when you start talking with somebody, you realize like, oh, there's a lot of aspects of this that I hadn't considered. Like, I'll just give you an example from a coaching standpoint. Like, I absolutely love the coaching, and I probably spend more time marketing than I do coaching, because I'm running a business and I have to get new clients.
Right.
You know, and so if there's somebody that does not like, you know, or doesn't want to run a business, it's not, I wouldn't say they can't become a coach. They might just not choose to run their own business. They may look for an employment opportunity after they get their coaching certification. But I went through a program called IPEC. I know that there are a lot of coaches out there that, you know, you don't have to get certified to be a coach. It was very important to me to do that. And I'm very glad I did, because I thought I was a good coach until I went through coach training. And then I was like, oh, I was doing a lot of things wrong. And it prepared me in so many ways. And IPEC stands for Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. And they actually do trainings all across the country. It's a very good program.
Okay. Well, I think that's good advice, because you're right. Today, people can turn over a business, you know, overnight, and everybody thinks that they can coach. Everybody thinks that they're doing it the right way. But when you really start to take the time, like I said, to invest in yourself and say, you know what, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it the right way. And, you know, you did do that, and you realize that, I definitely need a little bit of fine tuning. And I think that's good for everybody to do. You know, like I said, there's so many people who, oh, I'm a coach. I'm like, okay, well, what are you coaching? You know, where is your credentials? Because I think that's the best way to have, is having those credentials to ensure that you are doing the right thing and that you are truly helping people in the right way, because there are so many businesses out here today, like I said earlier, they can be open up overnight, but they're not necessarily the right people that you need to have coaching you. When you know, you find out that later on that you're still not getting where you want to be, you know, so you definitely have to be careful with who you're entangling with these days, because of the accessibility of everybody being able to just overnight start something and then say, hey, I have this business and I'm a coach. So you know, like I said, the information you shared tonight has definitely been really an eye opener. I like I said, I never thought about the fact that having a coach while you're, you know, trying to grow in your professional self, you know, while you're working on your job and so forth and getting to certain levels. I think that's a very good idea. I've never had anybody approach it in that way, or have never met anybody say, yeah, that's what I've done in order to make it. And if they have done it, they never came out and admitted it. You know what I mean? So I think it's very good to have that thought process for those who aren't necessarily concerned about wanting to start a business, but really want to continue to get themselves at a different level, working in the corporate entity, there's definitely different ways you can do that. And so, the information you provided is absolutely on target. And I definitely appreciate you coming on the show this evening. Before we leave, though, tell us again the name of the book that you have and where they can be purchase that. And then if you have anything else going on, any programs or that you want to talk about, or any events coming up that are virtual, or please share that information with us this evening.
Sure, Kimberly. So the name of my book is Winning the Game of Work, Career Happiness and Success on Your Own Terms. It is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And if people are interested in contacting me to learn more about coaching, I do offer free consultations. They can reach out to me on my website at terrybmcdougall.com. I also am very active on LinkedIn, and my handle there is Terry B. McDougall. I have also started a podcast called Marketing Mambo, where I talk about a lot of marketing-related topics, and you can check that out at marketingmambo.net. Currently, I don't have any group programs or events going on, but if I do, you'll see those out on LinkedIn.
All right. Well, again, thank you, Terry, for coming on the show this evening. I really appreciate your time. And do you have any last words for our listeners this evening?
Well, my last words would be, it really matters if you're happy. And so if you're feeling like not quite satisfied with what you're doing, maybe step back and start thinking about the way you'd like to have your life and your career look, and start taking some steps to make that happen, because this is the only life we get.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said that better myself. So, again, I appreciate you coming on, Terry. It's been a pleasure having you on this evening. And for everyone else, before we close out tonight's show, we have heard a lot about working with high achieving leaders to build a strong foundation for continued success. Terry laid it out. If you don't, something you missed, that you can reach out to her and learn more, and maybe help yourself get out of that stuck scenario that you may not be in, and that you may be in. And like she said, if you're unhappy, this is a good time to reassess that. And as well, if you have any other thoughts about what you want to do and you want to just reach out and talk to me, you're more than welcome to do that as well. You can reach out through me through the Facebook, or you can reach out through me through my email at kimberlywsbilc@gmail.com. More than welcome to go right to the website at www.wsbilc.com, and we'll have a great 30-minute consultation that is also free. And of course, if you are wanting more of WSBI, like an additional podcast show, we're also looking at doing some free virtual live Q&A sessions with a lot of our favorite entrepreneurs. We're doing a campaign. We're trying to raise $5,000 to provide more resources for success, so that you guys can not have to worry about reinventing the wheel, but getting the information you need to have for free. So please reach out to us. And like I said, you can do the donations through WSBILC.com, which is the website again. But again, I do appreciate you all coming on to the show and listening to us tonight. And again, thank you, Terry, for taking a few minutes and hanging out with us. But until next time, you all, we will see you next week with more amazing guests. Be sure to follow us right here on iHeartRadio, or either download our mobile app on Google Play or wherever you listen to your podcast. But until then, enjoy the rest of your evening, and good night.
Good night, everyone. We will be back next Thursday evening at 7 p.m. Follow us on Spreaker, www.spreaker.com/user/WSBI. View our new WSBI website anytime at www.wsbillc.com, and on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram.